Okay. Call the meeting to order at 6 o'clock. And let's see, I need a motion to go into closed session.
I move to go into closed session.
We have a second?
I'll second.
Then we need a roll call, right?
Yep. Fisher,
Here.
or it's to go into, yeah? To
Yes,
go into,
yes,
yep.
yes.
Green,
Yes.
Howery,
Yes.
Halverson,
Yes.
Ribino, yes.
Okay, we are in closed session.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm ending the webinar.
You want to do them first?
No, we'll go over
session. And, let me get my paper here.
We're on strategic planning with a presentation from Ron Dayton from CISA 2.
Correct. So, at this point in time, we have a presentation on strategic planning by CISA 2 Representative Ron Dayton and Ed O'Connor.
Yeah, Ed couldn't be here.
Ed's not
He's
here.
on vacation, so
Doesn't
Ron's
appear to
gonna
be
do
here.
it solo.
He chose to be on vacation and put me in this spot.
Well,
Not
that's
that I
something
get
you'll
along
have
with
to
it.
take up with your crony.
Right,
So the
right.
floor is yours, Ron.
Well, thank you. Thank you for welcoming me here. I hope to be welcome. And I have to say, when I found out Wayne was here, I was excited about that fact, and Wayne and I shared a little bit that I had presented to your administrative team, your central office team, and that we were going to proceed, at least to give this presentation. And I have such respect for Wayne that I was surprised he said, "Oh, go ahead." You know,
There were caveats I put on it, though.
yeah. Like, don't spend more than 3 hours. No, I don't think he said that.
No, probably not.
The other thing is, I have to tell you up front, I'm a person who moves around a lot, so having to sit here and talk into this mic is going to be a little challenging. I should say that to the public too, so my apology.
You
if
just did.
I just did. So if I hop around a little, I'll try to stay by the mic best as I can. You have 4 documents, and I'm going to work from a PowerPoint. It's a PowerPoint I have used before, so there are some pieces of that PowerPoint that I will go over very rapidly, and some others that I'll stick on for some moments. The first of those 4 is what I call the roadmap for strategic planning. Looks like that. And the second is an overview, a general overview of what the potential elements of strategic planning would be about. The third is something that Ed O'Connor sent me that he can share. And just to differentiate, my work tends to be at this level of the larger umbrella. Ed's work is more on the ground. And as you look at what he shares, he takes the same approach of planning as I do, but his work comes down to the teaching and learning level of that. So he works a lot with administrative teams, with school buildings, whatever that looks like. And his primary background is in science of teaching. So that's where he comes from. The last one is something I created a long time ago. I won't overtalk that right now, but it's about the rights of life, and I believe in that as a principle in general. So Angie told me she's going to be the master of the PowerPoint. And when I did this presentation before, I had made the point that this is always about, any kind of strategic planning is always about the students and their future and how best we serve them in that process. So whatever that strategic plan you create is about ought to be about students and their well-being, which isn't always just achievement, even though that's very fundamental. Okay. So I want to thank you for the opportunity on reflecting the now, and we're going to talk about a little bit now and next. Angie, thank you. And then imagine forward the next of whatever it takes. And so you have a now, and as we look at strategic planning, we're going to try to envision and make clear what now is in order to go to a next. I told Angie, since I had a chance to talk to her for a little bit, that what matters to me most, this is my 50th year in this career, a lot of which was in a superintendency, and I've got something I'll show you where I've been and what I've done. But I will tell you that the most fundamental piece of this work for me is this sense of who I am and my desire to have you know that first. So that's sort of the upfront moments here. I've been doing facilitation as a guide to your thinking. I always promise to end on time, so when Wayne said 3 hours, I promise you it won't take longer than 3 hours. And I don't try to have any joy or fun in all of this, but my passion for the work has always been enthusiastic, and I want you to know that. I don't come here just to take you through a process. I'm interested in what your outcomes will be, so. Over many experiences, I've learned these things. You know, everybody in this room, everybody has a set of experiences. Everybody has read things, and everybody has backgrounds. And I can't possibly know or predict what that causes each of you to think when you come to the table of your work as a member of the board or with strategic planning. The only thing that I can do is facilitate the conversations that we're going to have that lead you as a McFarland leadership group, along with your administrative team, your faculty, your staff, to what end in mind that they have. Are you familiar with Stephen Covey? Mm-hmm. 7 Habits? Yeah. So I work from that point of view with the end in mind, his second habit, as a foundational element of what we will do. Therefore, rather than trying to figure out what everybody wants, I try to get everybody to work forward to what everybody agrees they want. Okay. So here's the other last little piece of who I am. It's about, for me, the heart of learning. We can always talk about kids and minds, but for me it's about the heart of learning, which ought to translate into kids having a future that they can then embrace. And when we get to the rights at the end, we'll talk about that. So, here's the quick background. I'm the husband to Amadelia, a great gift. I am the dad of Angela, Rebecca, Richard, Andrew, Sarah, and Ben.
Way to go.
Just a couple of kids. And I am Bumpa, as I'm referred to. If you count it, there'd be 14 up there. And they are wonderful. I had some ice cream up in Door County when we were up there. The ice cream was called Exhausted Parent. And I said, you might want to add grandparent to that too. It's great fun. It's a little exhausting sometimes, but it's great fun. Okay. And then I was an only child. So I married one of 11, whose dad was one of 18. And I've gotten to learn what it means to be a part of large when I was a part of small for most of my life. These are the kids a long time ago, before they had kids. I always get a kick out of that picture. This is the family, all the grandchildren. And this is the wife that I enjoy my life with. So I only care to do that. Most facilitators might not spend time doing that, but I want you to realize that's what matters to me. And those 14 kids could be in McFarland, and may someday be, at least some of them.
Open enrollment exists.
Open enrollment exists. They'd have to come from Mesa and Bloomington, Indiana, but.
What's good about Arizona?
Yeah, what's good right now? So bottom line is, I recognize that McFarland matters to a lot of families and a lot of kids, just like these guys matter to me. That's why I care to do this at all. Angie, thank you. And then quickly, briefly, Aurora University, BA, 2 years in Batavia, teaching 5th grade, master's degrees in both administration and curriculum from Northern Illinois University, 6 years in Naperville, 5 years as a principal in Caneland, doing gifted and talented. Woodstock, these are all Illinois schools. You may know some of them. some of them aren't too far away, as principal and then C&I director. And then the Glenbards, which is a large district that has 4 high schools, 3,000 each, and 8 elementaries, a total of 18,000 students. So when I got a chance to come to Cambridge where I lived and not commute anymore, I took it and had 12 years of thorough enjoyment as superintendent there, even after doing superintendent and assistant superintendent work in the Lombard and Glenbards. So it's been a great gift. And I've done work for CISA since 2014. I also became a SMART trainer and worked with Ann Consemius, if you're familiar with Ann and Jan O'Neill. And so my primary focus when it comes to goal setting comes from that SMART goal process. There are other processes, but that's sort of the backbone of my own thinking. Okay. Last piece. I have worked, we created CAP in Cambridge, the Community Activities Program. I started the ESL program in Glenbard, so I have familiarity with the work that relates to English as a second language, which is now translated into a much larger picture. CISA 2 with the Liaison Project, JEDI, distance education. I'm trained in Covey, in SMART, in Baldridge, and educator effectiveness. So those are all pieces of the puzzle of me. And we're going to end me real quick here. And then passions relate to the why for me. Family and friends and fun, books I read all the time, and the hope that we have a future for our kids that is meaningful. Okay. So the why of joining you tonight is that there is so much, that so many will benefit from the work that you do as a board and whatever we come up with a strategic plan. Can I ask real quickly, have you all been part of strategic planning in the past?
To some degree.
To some degree?
For here,
Mhm.
both Kate and Bruce are just on for a couple months now.
Okay.
And I'm in my starting my 3rd year,
Okay.
but you both have been
So
here.
you've had some
Yeah,
experience within school structures for.
the biggest was before I got on the board, when we set up our mission statement. So I got to see, that was done by a large public group. But it had school people and a lot of public in it. It was a melting pot that we had, and I could see how that worked afterwards. We've kind of, we used to address it all the time, and then as time goes on, you start to not address it, but we did tweak it a couple times, a little bit.
Sure.
But we haven't looked at it for a number of years either.
Well,
But that gave us a direction from the
and it
community.
does. In a coming slide, we'll talk about that because there are some pillars
Mhm.
that you really have to stand upon, your vision, your principles, your goal, your mission statement, your vision statements. Those are all pillars to the process.
Yeah.
So it's good that you've dealt with that. Okay. So this first document, and we're going to kind of walk through it, and I'm going to speed through some and slow walk other parts of it in terms of the PowerPoint. But what I refer to it as a roadmap to strategic planning. And I think a roadmap kind of gives a good basis for how you look at strategic planning in going from now to next. And then I hope to answer your questions, if I can do that at the end. Okay, Angie? So, point being, you're going from your now to your next, and that you've established your end in mind up front as you establish those goals. Okay. So, in that first handout, in that middle paragraph, think about this. Think about the navigation system on your car. If you want to go from point A to point B, and you punch that into your navigation system, it gives you a direct route for a shortest time, and it gives you alternative routes. And the idea is you put in where you're going, it knows where you are, and there are variables along the way that you either can or can't anticipate. Road work, detours, whatever that looks like. But in the end, you're living toward that destination, and you define it with the goals. One of the things that's true today, and I may bring it up again as we talk, is that we set out in the goal-setting process to get from now to next, but there can be things that come along, like last year, that may cause you to have to adjust or even come up with a new goal or even drop a goal. And I'll talk briefly at the end about a book I'm writing called The Sea of Change, which has to do with some things we sustain because they're working, some things we enhance because we could do them better, and some things we need to abandon, which is the toughest thing of all for a lot of organizations, to abandon things. But the point being that we have to be more adjustable as we make these goals than we ever have before. We have to live a little differently than we used to, where we were a rock in approaching those goals. So in the middle also, taking the initiative and advance what to consider. And this is about working with a district team to discover the end in mind, the goals of that strategic plan, and not to be the author. So the facilitator's role sometimes is viewed as you're the one who's going to create the strategic plan. No, I'm not. And any facilitator who would come in and want to do that is making a big mistake, because then you don't own it. You know, somebody else wrote it and you're just carrying it out. So when this is all said and done, if you choose to work forward with me, it's going to be about your team within. And Wayne and I have talked about that. You know, the writing of it has to come from within what you've determined are the targets and the needs that you want to really attack. And so I wanted to clarify
That was this week's
that.
blog, which I sent you all.
I'm sorry, Wayne.
I said that was, this week's blog was on strategic planning.
Yes, right. So it is about your end in mind when it's all said and done, not mine. Okay. And then at the top of this, what is crucial, and there are going to be 5 components that I want to highlight. The first of those 5 is the idea that everybody has to agree upon what the definition of strategic planning is. Now, I put something out there on that page, and I pulled it from the Oxford Language Dictionary. That doesn't matter. What really matters, if you look at that last statement there, the crucial point is that whatever definition is going to be operationalized by the school district has to be agreed upon and in place by everybody who's going to carry that out. And so there will be a first early moment where you're going to work forward into a definition of strategic plan that everybody agrees on. Okay. And then at the bottom, why has become crucial. Have any of you read Simon Sinek's book, Start With Why? Have you had a chance to read that? It's a terrific book. He targets mostly the business world, but it applies in all circumstances. And there's a why to school that I think we believe in that's about educating kids, but the why has expanded, I think, quite a bit, and we all know that. So working forward to what is the why of school is important. And then there's going to be the question of, so why are we strategic planning? And we're going to need to answer that why, in my estimation, as a facilitator. I'm going to choose not to play this for tonight, but I wanted to leave it in as a slide. What Sinek talks about is this. Very often organizations will start with what? So we're supposed to teach English, we're supposed to teach math, whatever it is that we are supposed to be about. And then they'll go to the how, and they'll develop their professional development around that. But rarely do they start with why. And the loss of that is huge, because that why is what ought to drive the how and the what. And if you listen to him, he talks about how he grew up and how that wasn't the way he grew up. And then all of a sudden he realized he wasn't joyful, he wasn't satisfied, he wasn't getting to the end in mind, so to speak. And it was because he didn't establish his why first. So I don't want to overtalk it or play this, but that's, and he calls it his golden circles, or golden circle. Okay.
Oop, you know what, excuse me.
Oh.
I advanced the slide and it automatically started to play it.
Oh,
Give me
no.
one moment.
Well, he's really good to listen to, Angie, if you.
Let's see how I can get to the next slide. There we go.
So there was a slide in there about listening to it. Let's advance it beyond that.
Oh, okay. There we are.
So all to say, he pondered this thing called the golden ratio. A plus B equals, or B over A equals A over B. And this golden ratio exists in truth in mathematics. And he said, this provides order. So what the why is about, and this is the only reason I want you to spot this on the screen, why is about establishing the purpose. What is our purpose? What is our purpose in a strategic plan? What's our purpose in education? And any one classroom ought to establish their why. What's their purpose that they have as their end in mind? And that's what he's trying to get at.
I don't, you have lost me. I don't understand the relationship between that golden ratio, that equation, and what we're talking about.
Well,
Help me.
yeah, if you saw him speak to it, I'll give you a quick converty. If you listen to him, and I encourage you to do it sometime. What he said is the golden ratio exists in all aspects of nature. And I don't want you to overthink the mathematics of that. But what he said is, if you looked at nature, this golden ratio provides order. So in one fashion, if you think about it, the animal world, there's a balance of nature with some things eat natural food, some things eat other things. And ultimately, there's some balance that was put in place for all of that to work. And if you studied all of that all the way through, you'd understand that this golden ratio, as he called it, exists. And so when you watch him talk, he says, in the moment when he was finding need to find order in his life, and he read about this, he realized that for an organization to have balance, it had to start with why. It had to start with its reason to exist. And that reason to exist was defined by its purpose. So whatever the purpose of an organization is the place to start. Not with, we're going to make widgets, and here's how we're going to make them. So I'm going to short you on the deeper explanation, but
It's okay.
read the book or watch him, and you'll.
It's okay. Yeah.
So I apologize.
No.
It's, and then his quote, when most organizations or people think, act, or communicate, they do so from the outside in, from what to why, and they go from the clearest to the fuzziest things, but not the inspired organizations. And the inspired organizations start with why. So when we do strategic planning, if you would choose to have me work with you, whether that's a committee, whatever that leadership team is going to be, I'm going to push them to start with why. And that has to be that beginning point of where we're going. By the way, Angie, you're doing a great job. I'm flicking my hand out there. And that's sort of the background explanation that he gives for, organizations know their what, the product, the service, they know how to make it. But very few organizations get into their purpose or their cause or their belief. And they really should start there. Okay. Inspired organizations think and act and communicate on that basis. Okay. And the last thing I'll mention, he says, he uses this analogy, it's like trying to take off wheels up, which is not a good thing to do. Okay. Then we get to the end in mind. And this quote from Oliver Wendell Holmes always has fascinated me. What lies behind us and what lies before us. So the now is everything that's behind us that brought us to where McFarland is today. And the before us is what we need to navigate in order to get to our next. Is tiny compared to what lies within us. So one of the key pieces of this will be, as you as an organization are what you are now. In strategic planning, you're going to establish the inner soul of your organization. So those goals are going to speak to what are the most important things we could possibly do next. And we may have a list of 7, and I'll tell you, don't you dare do more than 3, because then you won't get any of them done well. But those are going to be what the soul of McFarland wants to be next. Okay. And I mentioned Covey's second habit. He uses a funeral eulogy. I think about it this way, and I just finished, I think I mentioned I finished in Fontana, and they utilized a survey, and one of the groups that they surveyed were the recent graduates of Fontana. And they wanted to know from them what it was that they got out of their experience. They wanted to know what was of greatest value. They wanted to know what maybe could be enhanced. And in my sea of change, I use enhanced instead of improve, because improve has a sort of a little negative connotation that something's gone wrong, where enhanced says, maybe there's part of it that's right, but we could do it better.
Actually, this district, by way of exit interviews with the departing seniors, we kind of do that same thing. Those are the sorts of questions that we ask, and then go back and look at the answers.
That's terrific.
But then also, we used to go back 2 years after they were out to get feedback, and then 5 years out to get feedback, because then that would shore up strengths and weaknesses and what we needed to be, what we need to improve for the future.
Yes. That is so valuable, and I have been a facilitator for exit interviews. I've utilized them, but I've also facilitated them for other districts, and it's exactly what they find then. And if you read it carefully, and that includes faculty, staff, community, if you choose to do that, you'll find some real key elements of what it is that your next wants to be about.
Well, a good example of that is one thing we found talking to these folks after they had left, and those that were willing to come back and talk to us, is that we were just stunned by the number of folks that needed remedial classes, graduates of McFarland that needed to take remedial classes when they got to college as a sort of catch-up. And that was a real eye-opener for us here.
Which would be a core piece of what
Exactly.
McFarland will want to address.
Right.
That's so valuable. Good for you guys for doing that. But that's the kind of thing that we need to try to get at. What a McFarland graduate at Life Points would tell you about their experiences and how that would then play into your goal setting. Okay, thanks, Angie. So, the question ultimately is, What would you want every student, every teacher, every administrator, staff member, parent, PTO member, community member, what would you want them to say about the McFarland experience? You know, what first memory strikes? I'm always fascinated with the first thing out of any of those interviewees' mouths, because that first thing tells you what is at the deepest point of their heart, of their experience. And then, so what end resulted for each, and you end up reflecting on what they have shared with you. So in that sense, beginning with the end in mind is about that school experience, but it's also about the post-school experience and what they have taken away from it and how they can utilize it and how you can learn from that to adjust who you are. Okay. So Cubby talked about another thing, and this is going to be important when we get to a piece in here about the planning process. He talked about that everything is in your future or in your next is based on creating twice. There's a first creation in his case that was physical, and then a second creation. Can you go forward and we'll look at that a little more closely? So leadership, which is what you are, and your leadership team with you is about that first creation. It's about, this is who we want to be, this is where we're going next. The second is about management. It's simply managing the process to get there. And what strategic planning is going to be about is that first creation. It's that picture of the future that you're trying to get at. And in his first habit, he talks about being proactive, which is exactly what you're doing. You said, okay, we're going to do some strategic planning, so we're going to be proactive and work this forward to a next story. When we get to this in a moment, it's going to be about values and principles and mission and vision. And you may have some of that in place, but I'm going to push you to see if you've got all those things in place eventually. Okay. So component number 3 has to do with just that, and it's at the top of page 2. And it speaks to your principles that are in place, your core values that are in place, your vision statement that's in place, and your mission statement that's in place. And as you mentioned before, that mission statement got in place. It's been visited a few times. As we would enter strategic planning, I would press a revisit of that since it's in place, but I'd also press to see if you've got any of these others and how you might take those forward before you actually get into the goal-setting process. The little example is from a gentleman named Walter Hoyt. He happened to be my grandfather. And his principle that he taught me very young was speak well of all or not at all. And boy, did I embrace that.
If you haven't got something nice to say about somebody,
Don't say anything at
that's
all.
right.
And he taught that to me as a principle. And I've got my own little book at home with my principles. And I can't tell you that I've looked at a mission statement for myself. But there's a part of me that knows the mission of being an educator. So the point being, if it's a committee, if it's just you and the administrative team, whoever's coming to the table of this, we'll at least want to take a look at those and see if we've got them in place and whether we need to revisit them. Okay. So these will be ultimately what leads us forward. So what lies within McFarland is found in those. And then on page 2 in the middle, this is something that I came to after some time of doing strategic planning, and I want to try to explain this. You see told my eye doctor I don't need bifocals anymore. I was wrong. So I'm going to take my eyes off for a moment and look at these. There's 4 categories that I've found strategic plans goals best fit into, and at least they ought to be considered. The first one being student achievement, which always ought to be thought first of in your goal setting. Climate and culture, collaborative communities, and that includes the school community as well as the community at large. And then fiscal and financial. And so in a goal-setting process, in strategic planning, you ought to at least talk about those 4 pillars when you begin to gather your targets. And sometimes they overlap with each other. In other words, you determine your growth is so significant that one of your goals is going to have to be facilities. And as you think forward, the facilities, there'll be a fiscal piece of that puzzle that has to be thought forward. So they interrelate sometimes, but my point in bringing these up are those 4 can be the basis for conversation around the goal-setting process. And whatever your now is can be found in those 4, and then whatever your next is may be thought of within those 4. And then there's always the 5th. My wife has taught me, never, ever assume there isn't an other way to do something. And she's really good at that. Okay. And then at the bottom of page 2 and page 3 is component 5, which is the now to next journey. And I did not try to put that all up. So I'm going to have you just turn to the pages themselves. There's going to be, if we work together, there's going to be a first filter that talks about, so what data do you have that tells you about your now? The non-student data, the human resource data, the survey data that you may engage in. Like I mentioned, the work in Fontana was significant in doing surveys of community, teachers, staff, administration, students, and we actually did students starting in grade 3 where the questions were formed and the teachers asked it of the students responded, all the way up to get that information. The professional development data that tells us where have you been and where are you now in terms of your professional development process. So all those on the bottom of page 2 are a part of this process. And then other filters to think through. I'm going to describe these briefly because I didn't want to try to put all that on a PowerPoint. So to the public, I apologize, it's on paper here. There are different ways to do strategic planning. My preference is to look at it with SMART goals. Are you familiar with SMART goals? Specific, measurable, attainable, results-oriented, and time-bound. And I find time and time again that's as good a method as any. But there can be a choice, and we have to make that choice. And then we have to describe that model for everyone so that everybody understands it. The third bullet, we have to stay true to that model. If you decide this is what you're going to do, then you have to stay true to it. We have to define the terms that we're going to use as we work forward. So when you work forward to this, you have to stay true to whatever you have defined. I don't know what Wayne would say to you, but I think I do know what Wayne would say to you. The more goals you have, the less likely you're to achieve any of them. Best case scenario, you've got 1. But don't go beyond 3. There are other things that you can call just work items, but stay within those 3 goals. They should be significant. And then the sea of change, again, I won't overtalk that, but what I want to talk about in the sea of change that I'm working on is a goal can be about sustaining something. Earlier, you mentioned something about, we used to, but we kind of slipped away from. There are things that McFarland is doing really well. And if you identify them, sometimes there's a reason to have a goal that says, we got to keep doing that well. And so we need to have a goal that identifies how do we sustain it. Let me give you an example. Each year, you could give me a number of how many educators turned over in that year. How many new educators came into McFarland? What is it that you have in place that assures that the new McFarland teacher, over the course of that first year even, will know what McFarland believes in, what McFarland has for instructional strategies, what professional development will you make sure they have in a first 1, 2, and 3 years? That's the sustain piece. What's working, and how have you assured that you're going to sustain it? And sometimes you need a goal for that. The enhanced piece has more to do with, so what's our next target? Where do we want to be? And that can be things that you're already working on. Lord knows there's plenty of things being talked about in the public today that you may decide that you want to have as a part of a goal. But that enhance means this isn't always about improving or fixing. Sometimes it's about just making it better. And then the last is abandon. Once in a great while, you recognize, how many years have we done this, and it really gets in our way? And we can identify why it gets in our way. And we need to stop it. And we're going to actually create a goal to help ourselves stop. That has a lot to do with communication. You get, everybody on the same page. We need to stop this, and then you plan how you're going to stop it. And that's not easy, but it's important. And then I'm not going to read through all the rest of these because we covered some of them, but I want to mention 4 more. One of them is that first non-negotiable. I can't work with you if you don't agree that part of the strategic planning is to have a communication plan. One that communicates internally, how it's working forward. One that communicates externally, how it's working forward. A second one is that issue of roles documentation. You need to be sure that everybody knows their role, that everybody knows what's not their role. And that's not always pleasant, but it's important. Not everybody's required to do everything, nor should they. And that needs to get established. And then the third one down there, within each goal in the plan, a clear description of the commitments to fidelity. In other words, everybody has to stay true to what the group, the team, the organization has decided. And the last one that I talked with Wayne about, and I have found this to be extraordinarily valuable. I used to do strategic planning in larger settings where maybe the board was in a leadership role, and I challenge you not to when it comes to the down-to-earth piece of that work. Or the administrative team was, or the superintendent was. And I'll pay you to have Wayne be the only one responsible for all this. But seriously, what I have found time and time again is you need a champion. And that might be a one or several people who are going to be responsible as champions. They understand the end, they understand how long it's supposed to take, and they are going to be the ones that champion it. They're going to call the meetings, they're going to occasionally ask people, do you understand where we are right now? But somehow those several key people from anywhere within the organization are going to be the people who are assuring that this goal is moving forward and that it's trying to accomplish the time bound and all the parts of that SMART goal once it's developed. So those are the things that I would care for you to think about and know about in terms of those non-negotiables. And then, Angie, we're going to hold for a moment, but I'm going to turn to this page real quickly. This sort of speaks to those 4 pillars: student achievement, school culture, community collaboration, and fiscal. And it also includes facilities responsibility. And when we work a goal process forward, whether you're looking at the data that you have, or you choose to do surveys, whatever that looks like, you're gonna come up with some targets. You're gonna come up with maybe 7 or 8 targets, and then you're going to work yourself down to the 1, 2, or 3 at most that you believe ought to be a goal. But those targets are going to be things that you're targeting. And then you're going to be identifying an outcome and what are the indicators that will say we've got to that outcome that we were after. And then you're going to identify the initiatives. Sometimes that's professional development, sometimes that's a communication plan. There's different initiatives that would come under any one of these,
And I want to jump in for just a second.
by all means.
Is that because Ron's talked a lot about doing the goals, and that actually is what in my vision, is almost one of the last things that you do. For me, the first things that I think you need to do is you need to spend a lot of time listening.
Yeah.
So I'm a strong proponent and advocate that if you want buy-in to a plan, that the way that you get the best buy-in is to sit down and listen to people for and my questions are fairly easy. What is it that you really like about McFarland that you hope doesn't change in the future? What are things that if you could change to make the district better, what are some ideas you have? What would you like to see the district in the next 3 to 5 years? And ask that, first ask that among yourselves, then ask it among administrators, then ask it among staff, then ask it among parents, then ask it among students and community business leaders. But you spend lots of time listening. And after you've listened to what people say, their vision of McFarland is, then you take that information and you sit down and say, after listening to all these people, we have a pretty good idea of where people think we are now and where they'd like us to be. Now, how can we craft that into, I would have said 3 to 5 basic goal areas that are in common sense language. Everybody should be able to pick up your plan, like I've told you all. If the plan fits on more than a front and back on one-page paper, it's too wordy and nobody's going to read it. It needs to be in common sense language, and then you sit down and say, okay, how will we know that we are making progress to achieving it? And that's your indicators. But the first parts of this whole process have to be spent listening, because you can look at, no offense, you can look at data, you can look at test data, you can look at all sorts of other things, but you're always going to see that through your own lenses. The more you listen to other people and their lenses, the truer picture you'll get when you put it all together.
Data like that doesn't necessarily address the culture of your district. Data like that doesn't necessarily represent the social aspects of your district. That sort of data is great if you're looking at academic goals. Are we looking, to improve our overall academic standing? Are we looking to improve the culture that we've got here in McFarland? Is it welcoming? Is it warm? Is it
Yep, and that's what you.
equitable?
Yep, when you listen to others, they're going to tell you some things, and some things you're going to instinctively say, I knew that. And some things you're going to say, I wouldn't have believed that in 1,000 years.
Mhm.
But those are the types of things. So then you take it, and even though Ron was being facetious, so you can, put it on me, the bottom line is, I've done this enough so that I know blank tablets never work. So what I always would volunteer to do is take the data, have your discussions, and put it into documents as, all right, here's what I think you're at this point. So tell me where I'm wrong. And not only to you, but to all the various groups, until you come up with a document. But don't start with your goals first.
Right.
Start with your goals after you've listened to what the people have to say. That'll give you what to do with your goals. Then you'll get the buy-in, because in one of the whys, there's more than one why. But one of the whys, I think, is because if you have the direction set, when you find your new superintendent, then you're looking for an individual that will take you in the direction you've already decided you wanted to go.
Yeah.
You're not looking for an individual to provide the direction that he or she thinks you should go. I was really good. I tried to keep quiet till this part, so, I tell you. So
You
that
did
was-
great. You
that
did a
was
good
struggle for
job.
me, but I got to
Well-
the end.
That said, Wayne, we're not off on the same page. Wayne and I had a bit of a conversation about places we've been where the goal was a book about this thick and nothing got done. So I am in complete agreement that one page tightly written is still the right thing to do. The other piece is, and this isn't in opposition to what you just said, but embedded
I have
in
passion, though.
yeah, we're gonna go outside and fight later, but, embedded in that data, too often, the word data instantly comes to test scores or, hard data. When, if you think about the survey process, and that's what happened in Fontana, the survey process was the listening. And there was a lot of listening that went on, and then that team that was going to produce the goals happened to be made up of some educators, business people within the community, representative of parents, but that team, that was their choice, that's how they wanted to operate. That team filtered all of that listening as well as some of the achievement data and came up with the 3 goals. They had targeted 3 goals. But it was all built off of what Wayne said. So we're not in opposition with each other.
I just want to give clarification.
There you go. There you go. Let's advance. Okay, so I think we're at an end here. I simply want to mention this. Ed O'Connor sent this to me, and he had planned on being here and then stood me up in favor of vacation, which I read him the riot act about. Ed is terrific. He's a data-driven person. And I would say most of his work, when you read over that, he's about data collection, data analysis, and there's nothing wrong with that. I don't believe Wayne's saying there's anything wrong with it. It's just more about, when you think about the big picture, you want to really listen first. But a lot of his work is through the science of teaching, so much of what he works forward is built off of data collection and then analysis of that, and then a scale-up process where he works with educators to identify what do they need to know and be able to do next in order to enhance their teaching skills. And then he works, forward with the student side of that to help understand the feedback and the outcomes of that. So he wanted to be sure you had that, and he would be working either directly with me or at least in the background as we would work forward with the goals, if you chose to do that. And then this. This is something that I gave you, there's a front and a back. And so this is a personal set of principle. I'll call it one principle, even though it has many rights. And I have operated from this belief for 50 years. I take that back. Once I started administration, I recognized that this was important. Right people in right places, doing the right work with the right tools at the right time has the greatest right results possibility. And if you can get those rights right, then the back of the page, which says, and then know that right results are that which causes each of mankind to find a place and a purpose in life that brings genuine peace to self and others in a lifetime. So, for me, that's my rights principle that I operate from, and I want you to know that as a background piece. All right, okay, you recognize them? That's the group Chicago.
Chicago, yeah.
Yes. All right. Do you recognize them? They're a little fuzzy because it's, you ever heard of a group called Earth, Wind, and Fire? Well, there they are. All right.
The rest of these people are too young
Yes.
to remember Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Now, can you see that? My daughter Sarah, who you saw earlier in her small form, she and I went and saw Chicago with Earth, Wind, and Fire. And at the end of the concert, they took 2 songs from each group and did them that way. And so good went to great in that concert. When you put them together doing each other's songs.
That's a lot of horns.
Yes, it was amazing.
It's a
And
lot
my-
of horns.
My point being, and we're at the finish here. Go ahead. That somehow, some way, this business of strategic planning ought to be a collaborative effort. It ought to be the consequence of collaboration amongst everybody who's committed to the end in mind. And it makes for great music. So when you get your goals in place and you're really working on them, after you've done your listening, which is critical, and you have looked at data if that's important, and you've honed it down to the 3 targets that you know you want to write goals around, that collaboration will make for great music. You have been more than gracious.
I got one thing to add on that.
Please.
On your music,
Yes.
Uh-oh.
it's about making good music. I mean, there's music, but once you nail it, like anything else, you know you got it.
Yes.
And it's a big difference on any kind of performance.
I agree.
It's a good analogy, but I know what it was and what it is, and I just, I'm a history guy here. I mean, I've been here a long time. And we had very, very proud of our music program back then. And I'm still very proud of it now. It's a good system. But there's a class ahead of me that has a lot of good friends that were in the band with us, and we really rocked the place. And some of them went professional, and they still are just, and they all came back, and they were up at, I missed it, so I didn't have the directions to get to the right place, but it was this last weekend for getting a place for people to perform in arts and stuff. And that, but they all came back from Florida, came all around to go back up there to perform. Our band director, Dave Heilman, was in the trap set, and different things. So, it goes deep to your heart and your soul.
Yes.
And if you find that, can develop that for a person, that person will utilize it, look for that same thing in many different areas. Because a lot of things go to your heart and your soul,
It's true.
and you gotta wanna go there.
Yeah.
It's about passion.
Yeah,
Very much so.
yeah.
And that was a non-farm analogy.
Yes, it was.
I'm proud of you, my man. We don't get a lot of those.
And the way this works is this is a presentation tonight, so on the next agenda, it'll be as a discussion item with and then we'll go to an action item. So tonight was so you could hear how CISA two could maybe, so think of the questions you might have for Ron and funnel those to me, and I'll funnel them to Ron and funnel them back. But then on August 2nd, we'll have this as a discussion for, does the board want to go through this process? And if so, discussion on that what that process might look like. And then if action, how CISA two might be able to assist.
Sure. I really thank you for your time. What I cared about most is that you understood, if you choose to work with us, this is how we'd work it forward. What I care about most is that you find the right way to take goal setting forward. So, thanks, Wayne. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, Ron.
I'll collect myself and get out of your way.
And we'll move along. Let's see, we've got some consent agenda items. Got some general fund vouchers and purchasing card transactions. Excuse me. Request approval of general fund vouchers 176076 through 176170 and 291138 through 291239, and purchasing card transactions dated 5/21/21 through 6/20/21. Some professional staffing recommendations. And some personnel, co-curricular staffing, and some personnel items. Do I have a motion to approve?
I so move.
Second?
I can second that.
Okay, second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. And we have some personnel items, no vote necessary. And that moves us to public comments. Maybe, Angie, you can steer us through that.
Absolutely. Give me just one moment. All right. At this time, I would like to invite anyone to make a public appearance. If you'd wish to make a public appearance by speaking to the board, please utilize the Q&A portion found at the bottom of your Zoom window. In the Q&A, we ask that you type your name, your address, subject of interest, and whether you have discussed this item prior to the meeting with either a district administrator or President Howery. After submitting the information, I will transfer you over to speak to the board. And it does look like we have one person who is interested in speaking to the board, and I will ask that individual to enter their name. As I had said, the name, the address, and the subject you wish to speak with. We'll give them another minute to enter that information.
We have one person who is registered to speak, Joseph Triplin at 3478 Orville Park Drive, and I will transfer them over to speak to the board at this time.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me? Hello? Oh, my God. Hello, can you hear me?
Oh, I see half of somebody there.
This is painful, can you hear me?
We can hear you now, yes.
Okay, great. I appreciate the opportunity to address the board. I have a question, and maybe you can provide some direction. I'm interested in the anti-racism action plan that the board is looking at or considering. And it appears, although I don't have all the information or much information, that the board is prepared to spend quite a considerable amount of money over a 4 or 5 year period on this action plan. And I'm wondering where the public can find out more information about what the plan is and how the money's going to be spent, those kinds of things.
So we've been told we cannot respond in public comments?
Right. In other
Okay.
words- Right. In other
Okay.
words, you can listen and you can put it on as a future, but this is for the public to give comments for you to listen to.
Yeah.
And then you can put it on as an action item for a future agenda.
All right, is there, if you can't respond, this is kind of a one-way conversation. Is there someone within the district office or someone that I could talk to, during the week to find out more information? Can you tell me that?
Yes, you can always call me, the superintendent, and all that, and I can talk with you and I can provide you with as much information as I have.
All right, I will be giving you a call.
Yep,
Thank you.
You're welcome.
This is kind of a, first of all, difficult forum to operate in. And, it's hard not to be able to have a kind of a conversation, but that's how you operate. So thanks, and I will definitely give you a call and see if we can connect and chat for a bit.
Thank you, Mr. Triplin.
Thank you.
Do we have another?
We have one written public comment, yes, that was submitted.
Yep. Additionally, we have one written comment that was sent to the board that Kate will read.
All right, this comment is from Liz Reiser-Lober on Frost Astor Court. As the planning for the next school year seems to be headed towards normal, it has brought up quite a few concerns. Being normal sends the message that the pandemic is over, and it is far from over. The trends in other countries usually become a blueprint the U.S. follows. That being said, vaccinations are just one line of defense against COVID. There are several other defenses that can be used, such as masks, increased ventilation, sanitation of surfaces, hand washing, cohorts, and distancing. The more precautions in place, the safer each student, faculty member, and parent becomes, whether or not they've been vaccinated. Thankfully, we live in Dane County that has a high vaccination rate. Unfortunately, vaccination does not equal immunity. There is still a worldwide pandemic happening with a formidable virus that keeps mutating. The Delta variant is spreading rapidly in various parts of the U.S. Who knows what the next variant will be? Who's to say the next variant doesn't defeat the mRNA type of vaccination most are currently taking for granted? It makes sense to keep as many safeguards in place as possible with the next school year. The AAP recommends masking for all children older than 2 years old, whether or not they're vaccinated. The only waivers would be if there is a developmental medical reason why a mask cannot be worn. Since you cannot mandate vaccinations, mandating masking seems to be the logical choice, especially since kids are getting back to school safely, and this is important. And then she has an attached recommendation from the American Academy of Pediatrics.
Okay, thank you very much. If there are no additional public comments, we will move along to the district administrator's report. So Wayne?
Well,
Take
everything
it
that I
away.
have would be in my McFarland minutes, which I have sent out to all of you. So nothing new has changed since I sent those out at the end of the week.
Okay, we have just some future school board meeting dates. And then we'll move on to our discussion items. And first of that is early release consideration for the 2022-2023 school calendar. We've been joined by a couple of representatives of the McFarland Federation of Teachers that are with us this evening to talk about early release, the advantages that it may have for us, and maybe give us a path to study in the upcoming year to see if this is something we might be able to achieve in the 2022-23 school year. So why don't we turn this over to Angie and Mike and get some education here.
Would you like us to be up there? or-
Absolutely. Why don't you move up there?
Thank you.
And you may want to introduce yourselves as your,
Angie has the information. My name is Angie Bazan. I am a social studies teacher here at the high school, and I'm the newly elected president of the MFT.
And I'm Michael Brown. I'm a fourth grade teacher here and vice president of MFT.
We really appreciate President Harvey inviting us here to be part of this conversation, so that in the hopes that we can all work together to try and find a program that works forward for the next school year to really help support both our teachers and our students. We all know that for a lot of our students, this last year has been a little crazy for all of us. But the best part of what we've endured in the last year are the things that we can take and learn from in the pandemic, and the things that we can use to make our school district better going forward. And one of those things that we as educators really took from what we've done this last year is having that day set aside for collaboration work. Obviously, a full day does not work in a normal school year. This was under unique circumstances. But is there time moving forward where we could have time for collaborative work to work on those things that sometimes just get left out of a normal school day? And so we looked to the idea of an early release proposal for the following school year. And this isn't something new. There are several districts in our area that do this. Madison does an early release schedule every Monday, the entire school year. I come from a district, my previous district, who had an early release schedule every other Wednesday, and they've done that for more than 20 years. So there are other places that we can look for advice and ideas of what's already happening out there.
can you kind of let the folks know what we do now in terms of professional development?
Currently, in McFarland, we have full-day professional development set aside. It's about 1 day. We have 7 full days in a school year during the actual calendar year. So we as staff have, I believe it's 4 professional development days in August before school begins. And right now on the calendar, we have 7 full days of professional development spread out throughout the school year, which is 56 hours. of professional development. K-8 has one additional day, so there's 64 hours at the K-8 level. So that is what we have been doing since I came here 7 years ago. Same?
Same.
And so the thought is that maybe if we broke that up into smaller chunks and we're able to have an early release schedule, our idea would be every other week and spread them out throughout the school year. That would allow for some continuous work to happen throughout the school year on multiple examples. And we have some here that we can talk about.
And that's not a full day every other week.
No, our thought would be a 1:30 to 3:30, like a 2 hours every other week, which comes out to 18 weeks of the school year. There's 36 weeks, so if we were to do it every other. So that would be 36 hours of professional development or collaborative time throughout the school year, still leaving us 20 hours of professional development time where we could have some full or half days throughout the year as a district-wide. And then the K-8 would have an additional 8 hours that they could have throughout the year. So it could be a nice marriage of both, I think.
Do you know why the K-8 is different?
I'm not sure I can answer that question, but I know historically the Friday before Memorial Day, 9 through 12 has had school and K-8 hasn't. They've had a professional development day. Does anybody else? I don't know the reason for that.
I don't know.
I just know that's how it is.
Okay.
Angie, is this similar to what you had in Deerfield? Because I think Deerfield is the district that you're talking about.
I taught previously in the Deerfield School District for 16 years, and I left there 8 years ago to come teach at McFarland, and they did have this. We had an every other Wednesday from 1:30 to 3:30 throughout the entire school year they've had it for almost 25 years now. And I know I co-teach at Edgewood College with another teacher in the Madison School District. He works at Madison East High School, and they do this every Monday throughout the entire school year. They choose to do it on a Monday as a late start. Some schools do it on a different day as an early release. That's all something that could be worked out, what would work best for families. So it doesn't have to be a particular day or, morning or afternoon. I think whatever would work best for families and for transportation. I know that's the big issue that we kind of ran into when we talked about being able to do this in the fall. I mean, ideally as staff with coming back to school this fall, we're going to have a lot of challenges when we come back. Some of our students haven't set foot in this building in 18 months. And so ideally, we want to have things in place to support them. And so moving forward, this might be something that we can continue to do in the 2022-23 school year.
I think what Angie just said is kind of a big reason why I think that this would be a really good plan for us, is that the time that we get to work on making plans for students come when the students aren't with us. And that's usually after school or before school, when in our contracts that's written as our prep time to prepare for the next day or for the next lessons. And so when we're in meetings or committee meetings to help our school, we're not prepping for our students. So if we're able to have a time set aside to take care of some of these business meetings or to take care of talking about students, then we still have our time to prep for our classes in a regular day.
I think one of the things personally that we really, really learned from the pandemic is on those Wednesdays, I can speak at least at the high school level, we were either working directly with students one-on-one or in small groups to provide extra instruction and social emotional learning. A lot of kids need that outside of the school day. And as Michael said, there just aren't enough hours between 7:50 and 3:15 to do that. And we also were able to work together and collaboratively to work for students, which again, either happens before school or after school, or it doesn't happen because there's so much happening in that schedule. For example, the school social worker would have time set aside that he could meet with multiple teachers at the same time because they don't all have the same prep period. Or the related arts team does not have prep the same time that classroom teachers are. So if they want to commonly get together and talk about a student and how they can best serve that student, there is no time set aside to do those kinds of things. And of course, teachers are more than willing to do them outside of the school day because it is what's best for students. But sometimes we all know that time just gets eaten up. If we start a meeting at 7:30 and we have kids in our room at 7:55, it doesn't give you enough time to do that subject justice. Where if we knew there was an agreed upon time set aside every 2 weeks to do those things, I think we would have some time to specifically work to meet the needs of our students. Do you want to go through and maybe we can explain some of those? So as we talked about, the proposal or the thing I think we were all talking about working towards would be for the 2022-23 school year, because there are logistics to work out as far as scheduling and transportation and those kinds of things. 1:30 to 3:30 is the suggestion, but of course it could be a late start in the morning if that were better for students or transportation. It's not elected to be in exactly that time. That was just a proposal, and some of the things we've seen in other districts. As we said, having the time this year to have dedicated time to work on these issues was so beneficial, not only for our staff, but to meet the needs of all students. There is not a teacher in this district who is not dedicated to the kids in this village. They're here because they care about those kids, but sometimes there's just not enough hours in the day to get that all done. And there are kids who need some of our extra attention, and we need to be able to have that collaborative time to do that. Anything?
Yeah, I think what's important here is that these times during the day, every other week, wouldn't take full away the PD that we need to do, right? So that we have left some time for full day PDs that district buildings can communicate and talk about other goals.
Right, this time could be used for planning intervention strategies. It could be working one-on-one with students, promoting social emotional learning for our students, data assessment. The equity work that our district is dedicated to doing could be done on a more consistent basis every 2 weeks rather than once a month every here and there throughout the year, which all benefit our students directly in the classroom. And there's kind of the math that we talked about earlier about a way to make this feasible. Go to the next one. We actually surveyed our MFT members and asked them about early release and what they felt would be most beneficial to them and their students. 71% of our members said that they would prefer an early release schedule to the current full day PD schedule. And these are some direct quotes from the comments that some of those staff members made, giving that it gives us flexibility to meet with collaboratively and be able to sit and talk about kids and what they need. I feel having shorter but more frequent time for collaboration interventions is more beneficial than just once a month. I'm not a classroom teacher, and sometimes the professional development doesn't always pertain to me, so having some more professional development time where I can do things that effectively and collaboratively meet my needs and my students. I think that second to last one there, in professional development, consistency is important. Rather than just have a one-off development once in a while, to have that consistency every 2 weeks, where we could say to staff, we're working on equity this week, here's your assignment, here's an article to read, here's something to do, and then we come back 2 weeks later and we continue that conversation. I think there's a lot to be said for being able to consistently work together and build as we go throughout the semester. And to be fair, I think the last comment is quite appropriate as well, is that sometimes when you are having meetings before school or after school, they're maybe not quite as effective as you hope because you're rushing in your head about what you have to teach in 20 minutes and what comes next and what's coming at the end of the day. So having time to sit and talk about or with kids is really, really important. And I would say, you can speak to the younger levels, so that's something that we really took away from that schedule we had this last year.
Yeah, I just think that time that's set aside, that's dedicated to this work, professionally, we know that that's best for students.
Mm-hmm. Next. So what could this early release time look like? We just put together some ideas to give you thoughts. We could have meetings where we are identifying students who need that extra social, emotional, or academic support. In most buildings, we have a care team where we identify students who are struggling socially, emotionally, or academically, and we would be able to sit as a team and work to figure out what's going to work best for that student, where sometimes we can't do that because everybody has different free periods and different prep times. One-on-one or small group intervention directly with students, professional development around some of our district goals or our equity commitment that we have. mentor meetings with new educators, for parent communication, having time set aside to pick up the phone and call a parent and make a communication is ideal. Special education case managers would have time to co-plan with regular classroom teachers and find out what works best for the students, what's
Does
working.
that not happen very much now?
It does, because teachers make it happen, if that's fair to say. We don't oftentimes have common prep period with those special education teachers or the social worker or the school psychologist. And so teachers do their absolute best to make those things happen outside of the school day. But sometimes, you know, as we said, there's other meetings and there's other things going on and those things.
And you envision counselors, psychiatrists, they would also be a part of the early release?
Absolutely. I think it's important, especially with, as we're moving forward, our kids need those people to be the backbone of support for them, absolutely. You know, standards-based grading, we at the high school have been doing it for a while now and we have it down, but it's starting to trickle down to those lower levels where this is a new venture for them and they could use that time to work collaboratively amongst themselves or with those of us who have been doing standards-based grading for a few years and have time set aside to help guide them and mentor them as well. So it's kind of twofold. There is that professional development of the district goals, but there's also all of these other things that support students that could be done. Perhaps one of the two a month is dedicated strictly to district goals, one of them is dedicated to this kind of work, or half and half, however we decided to do that. But we've learned so much this year. I hate to see us go back to the norm because it's always been the norm. We've learned so much about what helps kids. That's important to take that forward. Next. And one of the other things that, you know, early release, obviously there's a lot of logistics to work out. What do we do with kids for those 2 hours? You know, older kids, middle school kids are probably okay, but what do we do with those younger students? And so it's really a great way to be able to partner with our community. This will not work without community partnership and working with the parents in our community. But I know that Bruce has had some great ideas about being able to work with the community as well and bring them into our schools. So we could work with the public library to have programs on those afternoons, and we could work with the community center to be open for the middle school students, and we could work with Spartan Day Camp and other places in town to offer things for students. It's an awesome opportunity to bring people from the district into our building during those days. You know, we have people out there who want to be tutors or who want to be a mentor. That gives them a chunk of time to work with those students. I remember when I was in high school here many, many moons ago, we had an older gentleman who came in and tutored in math.
Mr. Hendrickson?
Mr. Hendrickson, absolutely. He was retired, but he knew math like nobody's business. And on his own, he would come in and work with students who were struggling in math. How perfect to have the time that he could do that every other week and build that relationship with kids. And it's also an opportunity for our high school kids, our NHS kids to be leaders, our ambassador kids to be leaders. They could offer tutoring sessions for kids. They could offer some of that social emotional support. So I think there's a lot of opportunities to make this happen. But those are logistics that obviously would have to be worked out. And we're hoping that we can work on that together with the school districts to make this move forward and benefit everybody.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
One is, how many professional development days do we have in that first term, that first 45 days?
I don't know, do you know? I know we as a staff have 4 in August before school begins. And then I believe there's one end of September is the first one.
Right now.
Because my point is, you're looking at this, and you can look at them. I think this transition this year is going to be difficult. And the one thing I feel bad is, let's hope and pray that by next year, things have kind of settled into a more normal pattern. But I think it's going to be that first quarter is where it's going to be difficult. That leads to my next question. You can answer the other one at the same time. But that is, how much flexibility is built into professional development days? I mean, is it possible this year could we squeeze time that, you know, if in that first 9 weeks of school, we had time to kind of let the teachers work collaboratively together and with the students? So
We have 2 staff development days scheduled in first quarter.
After school has begun.
September 24th and October 21st. That is
Yeah.
during the school year.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
I agree with you at the risk of, I don't want to sound negative because we're all excited to get back to school in whatever normal fashion we can. But I think that our teachers and our kids are going to be overwhelmed come September. And that's not a bad thing, that's just where we are, where the whole world is right now. We did a lot of transitioning last year from one thing to the next, and this is just one more transition. But our kids are gonna have to learn routines all over again, and they're gonna have to be in school for 7.5 hours a day, and they haven't done that for a year and a half. And so it's that first month or 45 days is going to be a transition for all of us. So I think that, and I have 100% belief that the teachers in this district will make that happen. Whether it means giving up their lunches, whether it means getting here at 6 a.m., they will do it, but they shouldn't necessarily have to do it in that fashion to make it happen.
And Bruce, I think to get back to your question, the administrators of each building kind of handle that PD day their own way, so however best for their staff. And there is time to collaborate with teachers, other teachers, but I think what this proposal for the next year would be is that it happens a little bit more regularly when you're waiting for once a month. Some of that work that's a little bit more urgent can't get done when it needs to get done. So
Yeah, and I think that, I can see that point. It's just that it is really a shame
Yeah.
that this is the year when you wish you could be doing this on a more regular.
100% agree, and
But-
that's kind of why we had emailed you all a few months ago, but of course, logistically, it couldn't work with the transportation issues. This year would have been the ideal year for this to happen because of all the things that need to be done. But if we can still move forward, I think that's great.
Thank you, first of all. I really appreciate, you've given me a lot of food for thought. The biggest thing is not having it be early release, but rather common planning time at the beginning of the day as an idea. And I know that your survey was asked about early release, so maybe it's kind of around that idea, but I have to be honest with you, I think that there are a lot of benefits to actually common planning time in the morning that might help some of the issues with the afternoon. For example, I know one of them would be athletics or any sports, or I'm sorry, I meant to say, or any other activities, athletics and other activities. So people would have to come back for that, so that would get rid of that. Transportation issues, if they were coming later in the morning, perhaps transportation wouldn't be an issue. The bus would be able to run at whatever time that would be. So I'm kind of stuck on not calling it early release, but this common planning time and looking at the pros and cons of different times of doing it. I'm thinking about the research it shows, I know with my high schooler, about getting up early. I mean, sleeping in and then doing the 9 o'clock was really his prime. We probably can't change the whole schedule because we're on the farming schedule and we're really kind of bound by, school the way we have it designed. But, so anyway, you just kind of rocked my world with that one because I do see the value in it for both teachers and kids, the common time to do things together. But I'm wondering if we could think outside the box, which you made me do just there, and think about pros and cons to different
I think that's a great point. I think
modes.
morning may work just as well or even better. That
Yeah,
brain
like
study shows
every other
students learn better
Wednesday or something,
later.
yeah.
And as you say that, it makes me kind of think at the high school level, we sort of did that this year. And
Mhm.
our schedule, we were
Yeah.
here at 7:30 in the morning, but our students didn't come
Until
until 9.
9, yeah.
And we did these exact same things in those hour and a half.
Yeah.
We had students come in early for one-on work or Zoomed with them. We were able to do some of these exact things we're talking about because we had that check of time. So yeah, I don't think it's locked into a specific time. I think whatever works best is great.
Can I impose on you, Arlen? As most people know, Arlen's got a positive connection to all the aspects of transportation here in McFarland. And if you could just kind of lay out for us, for everyone, what the difficulties in terms of bus transportation are going to arise if we do this?
Well, it can be a host of things. Because people are, well, if parents have to go to work, they have to find somebody, and places are hard to find. And sometimes, well, it's just gonna be another hurdle, okay? Bus schedules, they can be moved around and that, but it's gonna change up a system that people are accustomed to. We're creatures of habit, and we all are, you know what I mean? You know, my wife could tell you specifically, I just know that we've done some things before a little bit and shifted around, but we are creatures of habit. Everybody's has daycare issues, or what's going on, or how do you, there's a host of things that'll work into that, you know what I mean? So I don't know them all right off the top of my head, you know, but I know it'll, you know, it's a challenge like anything else. Can it be done? I imagine it can be. But there's gotta be things we're gonna have to respect the people that are, the parents and everybody that's going through it. Because they're gonna look at it, well, my job is the same. I'm out the door at this time. Now what am I gonna do? And then it gets pretty, you know, and if they can't find daycare, what do they do? And if they don't have a boss that listens to them, what are they gonna do? So there's some challenges to it, you know? So.
And I would say, the biggest thing, if you're contemplating this at all, is you have to start communication with parents in your community early. When I was superintendent of Mount Horeb, we did have early release. We went away from early release because of the parent backlash, because of childcare, you know, so I just know that if this is something that you're truly considering, you need the discussions with parents. You need to have, where will these children go?
Yeah.
Because if you're expecting to send an elementary child home to an empty home, I think you want to consider that. And to say, well, junior high, high school is one thing, but, you know, I've been through this. There's pros and cons, but I will tell you that the communication with parents would have to start early on, so you truly had a sense of what the community would, you know, if they would buy into this. You need to explain to them why. You need to explain to them how it's going to work. What are the differences between this and what you currently have? And, you know, because if they can see it and they have a chance to prepare, then it has success. But if this is something that's not made till way on the year, you will have more public comments.
Well,
That's a nice way to put it.
that leads me to my comments, I guess, just things to think about. When I heard about this, I was intrigued, and I talked to some of the teachers in Dane County and some teachers outside of Dane County who do it, and there was kind of a theme with the ones that are doing it in Dane County where the teachers love it. You know, they love that planning time. But the hard part about that is that the parents don't, and so there's that constant fight. So actually, some of the districts around here have gone away from it because there's that constant battle. So I think community buy-in and parent buy-in is going to be the key to this, or it's probably not going to work. I also found somebody's comments interesting. It's somebody in the Green Bay district. Now, they do early release in the afternoon, and she said it doesn't work because she's so busy trying to figure everything out. Like, she crams a bunch of learning into that period of time, and then she's dealing with some issues after early release, and she maybe gets 45 minutes of her time back, versus if you did it in the morning, those issues aren't really there. So something to think about. You know, you're always going to be dealing with the things that happen during the day if you do early release in the afternoon. I just think we need to, I guess my biggest concern from a parent perspective with the young kids is if they don't already have daycare. These are great options, but it's cost, right? So what's the cost to them? Can we offer something in the school? You know what I mean? Versus, do they have to go to Gingerbread, or do they have to go somewhere else, or does grandma have to watch them? And those are all gonna be things I think we need to think about now, and actually, you know, communicate with the parents and get their ideas on things too. I personally don't think it's a bad idea. I just think if we don't have an overall agreement kind of with the community, it's gonna be not fun to deal with the backlash
I
on.
think we completely agree with
Yeah.
you. That's why we're
Yeah.
having this conversation
Right.
now,
Yeah.
so we have a whole year to think about this and look at the pros and cons.
Yeah.
I am a single mom to a
Yeah.
now 16-year-old, but I was a parent when she was little, and I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Who's gonna watch her and what's gonna happen, and so those are things we need to think about. These were just some ideas that we brainstormed, but I think if we all worked on it together, we could come up with some other ideas.
Yeah.
And have some of those parents and stakeholders at the table too.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I appreciate what Kate is saying, and I think she and I have been thinking very similarly on this, because it came up in a different meeting, right?
Mhm,
Yeah,
I
we
think
had the
so.
same ideas, same
Yeah,
questions,
yeah.
like, you know, it does add cost and so on. But they're saying, 50% of the workforce is not going back to the office. So if you were to ask people today what they wanted to do, would be very different than, say, a year ago. People are getting completely rid of all of their office space. I'm feeling for realtors, actually. They're going to be hurting very much so. So keeping in touch with the community, what would be a better timing of it if we were to go this route? And then, like we said, and I know I'm telling you what you already know. I'm just kind of putting this on the public record. It's more about just, figuring out the pros and cons of different models and then seeing what would be best.
And I think, like Dr. Anderson said, this planning, yeah, we have a whole year, but really we start talking about the next school year very early on. So we don't have a full year, right? We've got to really make some plans in the next few months if you think about it. So I think you've put together some great ideas. It's just kind of talking about it, getting input from everyone and going from there.
Kate, that was my comment, is when does the calendar for the 22, 23, isn't that like January?
Well, I don't know.
Or even earlier?
What I've traditionally done is I've created something normally in November.
Yeah.
Shared it with
Yeah,
staff,
so,
brought it to the board in December and approved in January.
yeah.
I think that's about the
Yeah.
process we do
So
now.
we don't, we have months to try to
Mhm.
examine this.
No, we all know how fast time goes. It's gonna, all of a sudden, July 4th hit, and I'm going, I always considered that halfway through the summer, and summer just hardly started, But time does fly, and these are, I don't think you'll find disagreement anywhere that we're looking to do what's best for the kids. And getting feedback from the people with the feet on the ground is a great place to start, but I also think that we all realize that there's very real, very significant hurdles that need to be taken care of in one way or another. But I have committed to 2 listening sessions a year. We'll do one in the first semester at some point, and another one a little later on, and the makeup of those, can be talked about, but that's a commitment that this board's willing to make. We all want to be able to do what's best for our kids where it's feasible. And I hate to think that there are obstacles that are, we're not going to be able to deal with, but that's a possibility. But I sure think that we're going to try as hard as we can to put the pieces together to make this work. There's a lot of people that have to buy in, all the daycare providers, community folks. Christine raises a great point that there aren't as many people in the office nowadays, but that doesn't mean that they aren't doing their jobs from home. Because you're working remote doesn't mean it's any less work to do or any less stressful than if you were in the office, sometimes more.
Yeah.
You know, so these are all issues that we're gonna have to deal with, but I will commit that we'll make every attempt to make some form or fashion of this come to fruition.
And the listening sessions, there'll be one first semester? Does it make sense to have two the first semester? Because I think at that point, the schedule is set.
Well,
I'm just,
we can,
I think if I may speak, last year, some of the board members agreed to have some listening sessions with the teachers, just so teachers had a place to talk and
Mhm.
express what was pros and cons of what was happening. And Craig has agreed to do that this year as well.
Mhm.
Once in this, not necessarily around this issue, just allowing staff to have a chance to meet with the board and, you know, kind of off the record, just say, hey, these are the great things that are happening, here's a few things that we
Mhm.
could all work on together.
and we did it, if I recall, after school hours, right?
We did, right,
Yeah.
after school hours,
Right.
Zoom, of course, last year.
Yeah.
We might be able to see each other in person this year.
Mhm.
But I think that's a goal that we also have, is to improve communication between the teachers and the board and be able to all work together to do what's best for kids. And I think that's kind of what this whole proposal is about, so that, you know, wherever this conversation goes, we can have some meetings, or we can bring in the community, and we can bring in stakeholders, and we can all work on it together to see what happens.
Anything else, anyone?
well, perhaps we can work that into part of the strategic planning. It's all part of that in a sense.
Oh.
So,
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Thank you
much,
so much.
guys. Sorry we kept you so late.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, moving on. We've got action items. Discussion and possible action on appointment of 2021-2022 medical advisor. As per policy, annually, the district will arrange for a qualified individual to serve as the medical advisor. Any discussion?
I think we need a motion for.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do I have a motion to adapt? Well, we don't have a mention.
There are a couple
There
that
are.
are shared in the minutes.
The minutes.
Yeah.
In McFarland minutes, I gave
Yeah.
some potentials.
Okay, all right. I would look for a motion to appoint a district medical director. I'm having trouble on how to word this exactly.
Well,
So if you look at the meeting minutes, there's a couple ways to word it.
mhm.
Help me.
Okay.
Well, someone just needs to make one. Make a motion.
Okay, all right. I can make this motion. I would move to have Dr. Wayne Anderson and the administrative team to prepare a list of possible medical advisors for the board to consider at the board's August 2nd, 2021 Board of Education meeting.
I second that.
Discussion.
Can I just hear that again? the
Yeah.
Motion? We move to,
To have Dr. Wayne Anderson and the administrative team prepare a list of possible medical advisors for the board to consider at the board's August 2nd, 2021 Board of Education meeting.
and Kate, you seconded it? Okay.
Hearing no further discussion, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved 5-0. Okay. Next is action on addendum to the charter school contract for Wisconsin Virtual Academy High School, WEVA, Wisconsin Virtual Academy K through 8, WEVA K-8, Wisconsin Destinations Career Academy, and Insight School of Wisconsin High School.
And I think you should make a separate motion for each one, and I wrote a draft.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, can I begin that?
Yes.
I move to approve the presented addendum to the Wisconsin Virtual Academy High School Charter School contract.
Do I have a second?
I will second that.
Kate, any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
I'll make a motion. I move to approve the presented oh, God darn it.
Addendum.
Addendum. Hi, Norwegian. To the Wisconsin Virtual Academy K-8 School Charter School contract.
I'll second that.
Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
I move to approve the presented addendum to the Wisconsin Destinations Career Academy Charter School contract.
I'll second.
Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. I move to approve the presented addendum to the Insight School of Wisconsin High School Charter School contract.
I'll second.
Arlen, second. Discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. All right, thank you very much. Moving on, action of notice of academic standards for the 2021-2022 school year. Pursuant to Wisconsin statutes 118.301G(a) and 120.1213, the school district of McFarland hereby gives notice that the Wisconsin academic standards are in effect for the 2021 school year. I would hear a motion for approval.
I move to use and notify the public that the school district of McFarland will be using the Wisconsin academic standards for the 2021-2022 school year.
I second that.
Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0, and I would now entertain a motion to adjourn.
I think we still have more.
I didn't write that one, I thought.
That's a given.
There's more?
We were just checking to make sure that we were through everything, right? Yep.
I think it's
Yep.
everything
Okay,
according
is
to
that
mine.
everything?
Yeah.
Okay, never mind.
Okay. Would you like to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Okay. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Very well done, everyone. Thank you very much for your attendance this evening and robust discussion and debate.
And the meeting was adjourned at 8:32.
Meeting's adjourned at 8:32.